Hi everyone, I want to talk about the passé composé. We'll do a short review first and then the new information, which is how to do the passé composé with être. So starting off with the first version of passé composé, and that is when you have one subject and two verbs, as we see up here. And the first one is avoir, to have, and the second one is the past participle. So just as a reminder, we have three regular sets of verbs in French. We would take off these last letters here and add these endings to get the past participle. So for example, past participle for manger would become manger with an accent. Finir would be fini. And vendre would become vendu. My conjugation for avoir is j'ai, tu as, il a. Nous avons, vous avez. Ils ont. So when you put these both together, this is what you might end up having. So manger, I would do j'ai mangé, tu as mangé, il a mangé. Notice that the past participle is the same. Nous avons mangé, vous avez mangé, an accent, and ils ont manger. Accent there as well. For finir, it would look like j'ai fini, tu as fini, il a fini, nous avons fini, vous avez fini, ils ont fini. For vendre, j'ai vendu, tu as vendu, il a vendu. I'm running out of space here, but nous avons vendu, vous avez vendu, and ils ont vendu. Okay, so that is what we have been doing in the past with passé composé, using avoir and a past participle. Of course, these are just the regulars. You have plenty of irregular endings or irregular past participles, such as faire becomes fait, or être becomes été, or avoir becomes eu, or prendre becomes pris, etc. So you have multiple ones of those. Let me show you this over here. This is a document that I have called Passé composé for beasts. So what we'd be focusing on here is using avoir first. Then you have all of your regular forms, which I've just given you over to the side as well. And here would be those irregulars. Okay, here are the irregulars. You so far are responsible for at least half of these. Those specifically would be doing avoir, faire, être, prendre, which includes comprendre and apprendre. As well as pouvoir, boire, devoir, vouloir, and I believe that is it for right now. So being able to do those is extremely important, and just memorizing them. I would recommend that you just memorize them all at once. Otherwise, the other way to do it, of course, is as the semester goes on, you learn one verb at a time, and you, with that, would learn the past participle. But these would all go with avoir. So I would say, for example, if I was going to do avoir, I would say j'ai eu, tu as eu, il a eu, nous avons eu, vous avez eu, ils ont eu. If I was going to do faire, I would say j'ai fait, tu as fait, il a fait, nous avons fait, vous avez fait, ils ont fait. So all of these are done just like the ones that we did over here. It's just that instead of having a regular past participle, you have an irregular. The next part is that not all verbs go with avoir. Sometimes they can go with être. Okay? So the way that we do être, let me put it over here, change colors. So if you are doing it with être instead, we have to review how to do être. For je, we say je suis, tu es, il est, nous sommes, vous êtes, ils sont. Okay? Many times the regular past participles work. There are a couple of irregulars. Okay? What the question is, though, here, well, actually, why don't I do this? For example, let's do aller, partir, and descendre. All three of these verbs go with être. So if I'm going to do this for je, I would say je suis allé. It's regular. I just drop off er and add accent aigu. Je suis allé. Tu es allé. Il est allé. I'm going to go straight down. Nous sommes allés. Vous êtes allés. And ils sont allés. Same thing, it's just that I'm using être instead of avoir. Partir, to depart, is regular as well. Take off ir and add I. So I would do this with être. Je suis parti. Tu es parti. Il est parti. Nous sommes partis. Vous êtes partis. And ils sont partis. Same with descendre. Descendre is regular. Take off re and add u. With être, je suis descendu. Tu es. Tu es descendu. Il est. It's a little messy. Il est descendu. Nous sommes descendus. Vous êtes descendus. And ils sont descendus. So you see that it's the exact same thing as we were doing before, simply that instead of using avoir, I'm using être. So let me show you the ones that go with être, because of course the next question is, well, how do I know when to choose avoir or être? Okay? These are the past participles or the verbs that go with être. Okay? You will have to memorize this list. There's multiple ways to do it, but before I get into that, I just wanted to point out which are the regulars and which ones are the irregulars. So if we look at aller, for example, aller has just an accent aigu, that's regular. Parti, sorti is also regular. Venir is irregular. Instead of dropping off the IR and adding an I, you actually use a U instead. Descendre is regular. Retourner, arriver, rester, monter, tomber, entrer are all regular. Naître, which means to be born, is irregular. I have né as the past participle. Mourir is irregular. My past participle is mort. And anything that has venir in it, like devenir and revenir, is also similarly irregular, just as venir is regular. So devenir becomes devenu, revenir becomes revenu. So those are the only 5 that are irregular. Everything else has the regular ending. So once again, how do I choose between avoir and être? I can memorize this list in multiple ways. Okay, some people have a favorite way. One way is to look at the maison d'être. There's oftentimes, you can look this up on the internet, or there's an image in your book. The maison d'être is basically literally a house, maison, and it is about être. It's a play on words with raison d'être, which means your reason to be. But this really highlights the fact that these verbs usually have to do with either movement or a state of being, or a change in state of being. So for example, if you look closely at these, to go, to leave, to exit or to get out of, to come, to go down, to return, to arrive, to remain, all of those seem like movement. To be born or to die would be an example of a state of being. To become would also be a state of being, etc. So the maison d'être, if you are a visual learner, may be a really good thing to look at. That's in your book, like I said, or if you just Google it, you will find it. Or some people like to set things up as opposites. If you look at the movements, of course, a lot of them have opposites. So to go and to leave, those are opposites. To descendre, to go down, and to go up. Descendre and monter are opposites. To be born and to die, those are opposites. So some people like to pair them up. That may be something that you want to do to help you just logically remember them. Another way is to use an acronym and to use the first letter of these verbs to memorize them. The most common acronym that people use is Dr. Mrs. Vandertramp. So Dr. Mrs. Vandertramp. Vandertramp is spelled with 2 P's. And then just lining those up. So for example, D could be devenir or it could be descendre, right? You can switch them up on the order. Revenir, for example, or it could have been rester or it could have been rentrer or retourner. M for monter, that could have also been mourir. And just going down and memorizing it this way to remember which ones there are. This may be difficult because, of course, there are multiple verbs in French that start with these letters. And unless you're very familiar already with the list, it may lead you astray. But Dr. Mrs. Vandertramp is extremely common. Then you could also decide to use a song to memorize these. This is how I memorize them. I personally have a good audio memory, and so this was a great way for me, but you may want to play with it, see if it works for you, but of course it's not necessary. I will sing the song that I was taught, but there are other ones. Mine goes to Yankee Doodle, and there is an MP3 on your module where you can listen to the song again. But I'll sing it here once. Aller, parti, sorti, venu, descendu, retourné, arrivé, resté, monté, tombé, entré, nayé et mort, devenu, revenu, rentré, passé. So this list goes with that song, just goes in order. Between né and mort, there's a little double syllable here that I need to add, and, in order to finish it off. And then these last 4 are just really shouted out. This is a song that, my own French teacher made up, and it's not perfect for the number of syllables, but of course I encourage you to think of a different song, put your own creative spin on this, pick one of your favorite songs and move your verbs around to make it work. But yeah, if you would like to memorize that song, I encourage you to go and listen to the MP3 a bunch of times, breaking it down. I usually try to break it down into chunks, so I would have students memorize these first 4 first. Aller, parti, sorti, venu. Aller, parti, sorti, venu. Then add these 2. Descendu, retourné. Descendu, retourné. Then this last part gets a little bit hard. Arrivé, resté, monté. Arrivé, resté, monté. Tombé, entré, nayé et mort. Tombé, entré, nayé et mort. Okay? And then the last 4 are shouted out. Okay? So let me scoot over here and talk about, once you have decided that you are using the passé composé with être, because you know that it's in the song or in your list or whatever it is, then you need to think about this very important and special thing that happens with those verbs, and that is agreement. So as before that we have had in French, we have to make gender and number agreement with something. So if something is masculine versus feminine versus singular and plural, we have a different action to do with those. For masculine, you don't do anything. For feminine in the past, on adjectives, for example, we have added an extra E. For singular, you don't do anything, but for plural, you add an S. And of course, if you have feminine and plural, you would add an ES. An example of this would be like des chaussures, shoes. This is a feminine thing, and it's plural. Noir. Noir is an adjective. I'm going to add an E because chaussure is feminine, and an S because chaussure is plural. So this kind of action is essentially what we're doing onto our past participle, but this only happens in être. Only happens in être, okay? Only with être verbs. So if I go up here to my 3 examples with aller, partir, and sortir, aller, partir, and descendre, I look at je suis allé. Well, if I identify as a female, I'm going to add an extra E. If I identified as a male, I'm not going to add an extra E. So depending on the speaker here, you would add an extra E onto the verb. Tu es allé. Once again, the person to whom you're speaking, are they identifying as masculine or feminine? You have to figure that out or ask them, and add an E if they identify as feminine. For il, for example, you would definitely not put an extra E on there, but if it had been elle, you would. For nous sommes allés, we have to figure out, is this a group of all women? In which case, yes, you'd add an extra E. For sure, though, it's going to be plural because it's nous, which means we. Vous êtes allés, you'd have to ask yourself, okay, is this a singular or a group of all women? In which case, you may have an E. Vous can be either singular or plural, depending on formal or informal. So we may or may not have an S. Ils sont allés. The il here is definitely not feminine, so I'm not going to have an E, but I'm definitely going to have an S. Had it been elles sont allées, definitely I would have an E and definitely have an S. Okay? This applies then to all of these other ones as well. Je suis parti, depending on the speaker, maybe an E. Tu es parti, depending on the person to whom you're speaking, maybe an E. Il est parti, definitely no E. Nous sommes partis, maybe feminine, definitely is plural. Vous êtes partis, maybe feminine, it may be plural. Ils sont partis, definitely not feminine because it's il, but it's definitely plural. Je suis descendu, depending on the speaker, have an extra E for feminine. Tu es descendu, depending on the person listening, may have an E. Il est descendu, no E. Nous sommes descendus, may be feminine, definitely is plural. Vous êtes descendu, may be feminine, it may be plural. Ils sont descendus, definitely not feminine, but definitely plural. Okay, so you just have to really, what we do is we call this verb agreement. Okay, so previously we did noun adjective agreement. And now with doing être verbs, we now have subject verb agreement. Okay? So what we want to do here is then practice and going through these steps right here. First, you want to decide if you're using avoir or être based on your list. You look at the verb over in parentheses on the right. That's going to tell you, is it in the list or is it not in the list? You choose and you conjugate avoir or être accordingly. The second word then is going to be adding the past participle. It may be regular, it may be irregular. And finally, you need to add agreement, possibly. Remember that is with être only. So let's look at these and go through them. Tomber. I can sing my song or think about my list, and I would find that tomber is an être verb. So I would conjugate this as je suis for être. The past participle is tomber, it's regular. And I would ask myself, do I need agreement? I've used être, so I do need to watch out for agreement. If I identify as feminine, then I'm going to have an extra E. If I don't, then I don't have an extra E. I personally identify as feminine, so I'm going to add an extra E. For numéro 2, tu with chercher. Does chercher go with avoir or être? Think about my list or my song. It does not go in that list, so I conjugate it with avoir instead. Tu as. Chercher is regular. Chercher with an E accent aigu. Do I need agreement? The answer is no, because I didn't use être. See that? I used avoir. Numéro 3, il with sortir. Sortir, does that go with avoir or être? It goes with être, because I would look at my song or my list. Il est. Sortir is a regular past participle, sorti. I would need to look at agreement because I've used être, but I have il singular here, so I don't need to add anything onto the end. Numéro 4, nous, which is standing in for moi and Caroline. Let's assume that moi is a feminine person. Descendre, am I going to do it with avoir or être? It's in my song or it's in my list, so I'm going to do it with être. Nous sommes. Descendu is regular. If moi and Caroline are both feminine, then we're going to add an extra E. And plural, we're going to add an extra S, so E and S. Okay. Numéro 5, vous, which is Madame Dubois, feminine person, and naître. Does this go with avoir or être? I sing my song or I look at my list. Naître, to be born, goes with être. So vous êtes. Irregular ending, né. Madame Dubois. I have to think about this. Do I need agreement? Well, I've used être. So therefore, I do need to worry about agreement. Madame Dubois is feminine and singular, so I just add an E. Monter, to go up. Is that with avoir or is it with être? It's in my list, it's in my song, so it goes with être. So il sont. Regular ending here, monter. Do I need agreement? Yes, I do, because I used être here. Il is masculine, so I don't have to have an extra E, but I do have to have an extra S because it's plural. Faire. Avoir or être. This goes with avoir. It's not in my song. Passé composé or past participle is irregular. Tu as fait. Do I need agreement? I look back. Did I use être? No, I didn't, so I'm definitely not going to get agreement, no matter what the gender of the person is here. Prendre, to take, is it with avoir or être? It's not in my song or list, so it goes with avoir. Elle a, irregular ending, pris. Do I get agreement here? I look back at the verb. Did I use être? No, I didn't. So even though that this is a feminine person, I'm not going to get any agreement on the end of pris. Mourir, to die. Does it go with avoir or être? It's in my song or list. Therefore, I'm going to use être. Nous sommes morts. It's irregular. Then I have to think about agreement. Do I need it? I've used être, so I need to think about agreement. Moi and David, that's at least one male. So I can't have an extra E here because it's definitely not feminine since David identifies as male. But I do want to get an S here for sure because it's plural. Venir. Venir, to come. Is this avoir or être? It is in my song and list, so I'm going to say vous êtes. It's irregular. Venu. Now I have to think, do I need agreement? Let's look back. I've used a form of être here, so I do need to worry about agreement. I've got toi and Samantha. Toi and Samantha is two feminine things, so I'm going to have an extra E. And they're plural, so an extra S. I'll do one more, number 11. Let's do it with, il, plural. Vouloir, does it go with avoir or être? It's not in my song, it's not in my list, so it goes with avoir. Ils ont. Vouloir is irregular. Voulu. Do I need agreement? Let's look back. Did I use être? No, I didn't. This is avoir, so I'm not going to get any agreement here. It doesn't matter that this is plural, doesn't matter the gender or the number. I'm not going to get agreement because it went with avoir. Okay, so you just have to remember that it's only your être verbs that will get agreement. I hope that this helps.